Thank you everyone for being here. And it's time now to start with the affinity group updates. So, Yvonne Bosson, can you tell us what you're doing at the Dana-Farber, please?
Hi everyone. Thank you, Anne. Thank you very much. I just jumped on. The discussion was going on and mentioning the work that just started at the Aquilino Cancer Center in Maryland. So that's really fantastic. I think that was the big news I wanted to share as well. So I'm super glad Mark was telling us a little bit about the experience. I'll be honored and I'm really excited to participate somehow in this adventure. I'll be interviewing some of these patients to collect their report on their experiences, and so very excited to be part of this study. We're and here at Dana-Farber, so still working on this study of psilocybin assisted therapy in patients receiving hospice care. And so we are now seriously moving towards the regulatory steps. So next week I'll be presenting the study concept and protocol to the Dana-Farber Clinical Trials Advisory Board. And then that's the step we have to complete before being able to submit our protocol to the FDA. So, you know, these are the steps we're going on now. And sorry, I'm not alone here. Yeah, so that's pretty it. And I think one thing I would like to share today is that I'm receiving more and more emails and interest regarding affinity groups, and people are interested in the serious illness field. Sorry, just hold on 1 second, please. I'm gonna change the. Okay,
Life
that was
in 2020, Yvonne.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the Zoom meeting. So, Mackenzie, Bellar, and me are on this, our reference for this affinity group. If there is any interest, please email us, and I think we'll be activating somehow this group in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. And I was just meaning that we haven't been meeting or starting any formal meetings yet, but I think it's time. You know, I received like people are interested, including in Harvard hospitals, now at MGH in palliative care, at BI. There are a PA group at Dana-Farber who is really interested in getting involved in psychedelic assisted therapy. So thing that's really starting, there is some interest. So it would be great if we can gather and talk about next steps and present one to each other. So I think that would be a nice thing to do in the next week. So stay tuned, please. And thank you all for being here again.
Thank you, Yvonne. You're doing wonderful work. It's great.
Thank you, Anne.
So Jeremy Daines, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a quick update on the professional association work. As many of you are aware, we held kind of a first summit meeting several weeks back. And what the midwives, as we're calling ourselves, are planning next is actually to have one more of those occur probably towards, well, we'll see, depending on holidays. It might be beginning of January. But what I wanted to just announce to this group is that we're getting ready to bring together those who are willing to form a steering committee whose mandate will be to ultimately bring to life a board of directors for a new professional association. But the steps, you know, there are probably many steps before that, but think of it almost like the Constitutional Convention. We're bringing together lots of delegates from all over the country to decide, you know, hey, how are we going to vote? And there's a lot of like really formational work around building this organization or this association. But it won't be just that. It'll also be creating new working groups inside the steering committee, things like ethics, things like diversity and inclusion, how are we going to raise money, things like that, right? Really important stuff. So we're getting down to the nitty gritty, and we feel like it's a pivotal time. That is all to say. Many of you have reached out to me directly and expressed interest in participating or volunteering. Please do continue to do that if you would like to help shape the future of this work. That's where this is going. So if you're called to help, please do let me know, because we'll be sending out a giant doodle poll to figure out when all of us can meet like this as a group. Again, we'll put some dates out there, but looking like end of December, beginning of January. So again, thanks for everyone who's already reached out. It is moving. We're pretty excited, and there's a lot of great conversation and energy around creating this association. And that is all I got. Back to you, Anne.
It's a lot, Jeremy. Thank you. Thank you for being the Boston representative in this national group. It's great. Dan Grossman or Ann Dutton? Contemplative.
I'll jump in. Ann couldn't make it today.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Dan.
So hi, everyone. So I co-direct the Contemplative Practice Affinity Group along with Ann. And I just wanted to briefly just say what we're about. We are basically a forum for discussing the intersection of primarily Buddhist and Vedic practices with psychedelic research and therapy. We meet usually the day before BPRG meets, and we met yesterday and had Sarah Lewis from Naropa University and Marcela Otalora from MAPS, who's one of the PIs for the Boulder site of the MDMA study, joining us just to talk about some of their work integrating contemplative psychotherapy methods into the MAPS MDMA therapist training. It was really cool what they're up to over there and some of the stuff they've added to the training protocol. So if that sounds interesting, if you're broadly interested in the intersection of meditation practices and psychedelics, shoot me an email. I'll add you to the email list and we'll take it from there. I'll put my email in the chat.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan. It sounds like an amazing presentation yesterday. What fun.
It was.
Did you record it? Because, if they're recorded, we could put them on our website.
We did. We don't really have a policy right now on how to share those because there's some amount of self-disclosure, and we also want to respect that not everybody wants the whole group to know what they're up to. So as appropriate, we might share them with the larger group. Yesterday is an example of something that might be okay to share with everyone, but
okay.
Well,
we'll talk offline about that and we'll share it because we have a way of doing that.
Okay.
Sherry has a way of doing that. Thank you, Dan. Francis Guerrero around ketamine.
Yeah, thank you. Hi there.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, so we have a ketamine interest group, more appropriately ketamine assisted psychotherapy interest group, although we are discussing all aspects of ketamine work. We've met only once since the last BPRG, that was at the end of October. There was about 15 of us on the call, representing three practicing cohorts in Cambridge, research endeavor in Boston, one practice site in Lexington, one practice site on the North Shore of Massachusetts, and one site in Portland. Mostly just touching base. A lot of these folks were part of our training a little over a year ago here in the Boston area with Phil Wolfson. So we discuss COVID protocols, research proposals, gathering research papers together to share information, discussing different means of modality, the way we're practicing or largely not these days. And just to connect in and sort of keep the spirit of the community alive. There's a lot of interest and people put forward other topics they want to discuss. We do a little bit of peer supervision and talking about training when that's going to be available. Probably, spring the earliest, but there's a small cohort of us that are planning some private trainings for local clinics who want their clinicians trained in ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. And we do look towards a time when we can do a larger training of 25 or so local area clinicians. So folks who are interested can email me at francisguerriero@gmail.com, and we'll take it from there. That's about it. Thanks so much, Anne.
Thank you, Francis. So Franklin King, about the Mass General Center, please.
Yep, I'm here, sorry. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I think I gave an update a couple of months ago, but for those who weren't here, we have a center now at MGH, and it's called the Center for Neuroscience of Psychedelics. And as I was describing on one of the breakout groups, essentially there's kind of three major organizational prongs of it. So obviously neuroscience is sort of the foundational focus of this group. And most of the studies that are furthest along at this point, and no, none of them are through the IRB. We sort of paused that in the face of COVID, but a couple of them are pretty much ready to go, and we've consulted with the IRB beforehand. So we're feeling pretty sanguine about the chances of that. But the initial studies are really all neuroimaging studies, and one of the leaders of the center is actually the head of the entire division of neuroimaging at MGH. So it's going to be really exciting, I think, to see what that team can kind of ascertain from those studies. Then we also have a division of training and education, which is run by me. I'm particularly interested both in kind of innovative ways of thinking about how to optimize the therapy, but also something that I've already kind of embarked on in the last couple of years in terms of educating psychiatrists and other clinicians. Because I think on the one hand, yes, there's a dearth of trained psychotherapists. On the other hand, really most people outside of groups like this don't know anything about psychedelics, and they're coming, and yet there's really a knowledge deficit in the field. So that's kind of my wheelhouse. And then the third is a division kind of more molecular neurobiology. And the person running that is also interested in plant medicine as a whole, Steve Haggerty. So I think that's going to generate some really interesting stuff as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Mackenzie Bullard, about the diversity outreach and the DOI. Mackenzie?
Inclusion, is that I?
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. Well, I just wanted to start off. I'm Mackenzie. To say that I have just an amazing amount of gratitude today to start off. And I say that because this group, this DOI group, has really turned into what Cornell West talks about a lot, is paideia. And that is the sense of genuine learning through community and the development of seeking truth. And I think that that's what this group has done a lot of. And we've done some great things. And one of the things we did recently was had Alan Davis on, who did a great job of like kind of conceptualizing for us what opportunities are for this kind of work, and integrating different perspectives into the idea of research and through supporting people. I'm actually going to drop a link into the chat for you all to check out their page, because they're doing a lot of stuff to help support therapists of color, students of color, and other individuals looking to do scholarship in this work. And then big shout out to Nick and Benoit, who helped co-facilitate that. And as always, our GOI team and Anne in leadership. You all hold a great space for us to do this work. Moving forward, we have some cool, really interesting events. We have Jay Sevelius, did I say that right?
Sevelius. Sevelius.
Okay, awesome. On Sunday, December 9th, she's gonna researcher at UCSF. She's gonna come talk to us about gender equity in research. And then on February 28th, we are looking forward to having Valerie Chambers and Ben Cook from the Cambridge Health Alliance Psychiatry Department come talk to us about Black voices in psychiatry. And then we have some co-sponsor opportunities coming up. One that really in particular, I think Benoit might be here and he can speak to it a little bit if you would like, but the Sabina Project is a group of Black focused individuals trying to raise Black voices in psychedelics. They're doing a great job of retelling the history, re-grounding us in the indigenous history of Marina Sabina, and doing some great workshops. You can actually support them too, if you're interested in that kind of work. And then I just want to give a shout out, our group has increased by like, I don't know, we have like about 25 members on our listserv now that are active, good standing members in our DOI group, which I think is amazing because when we started this, it was about 6 of us, and it's been about 11 months now or so, and we've done a great job of increasing participation. And then the final thing, I'm going to pass it off to Georgie, who's got a really interesting project she's been working on with some of the group's members as well.
Thank you, Mackenzie.
Thanks for that, Mackenzie. Hi, everyone. So in line with the DOI's mission of bringing diversity and inclusion into the field of psychedelics, we're curating a list of musical resources for use in psychedelic assisted therapy. And we are creating this list so that the music, which plays such an important part in the entire psychedelic experience, is inclusive and responsive to cultural diversity. So right now, this is just an ongoing document. Mike Alpert has included several playlists that he's developed with maps. And if you're interested in participating in the document, just email one of us. I think you can find Mackenzie's email on the BPRG website under the DOI. So yeah, so that's the latest exciting development. And these are resources that we are willing to share with anyone who is interested in improving the diversity and inclusion of their psychedelic work.
Great. Thank you so much, Georgie. I would like to just add to a special shout out to this group for the work that they've been doing. That our statement of solidarity was a really wonderful collaborative process this summer. And I say we because it is the BPRG, and we couldn't have done it without the DOI, and the DOI wanted it to come from all of the BPRG, and it definitely feels like that happened. So thank you for that. And then also, maybe you could speak to the support you've been giving some of the researchers as they're setting up their protocols, with helping them think about how to make sure that the work they're doing is as inclusive as possible. So you have a document, I know you've worked with Yvonne on that. Yeah.
Sure, we have like the preliminary, I mean, I would say they're pretty well thought out, some structure though, like when we think about diversity outreach and inclusion and research, we start to ground ourselves in, well, how do we do that? A lot of that starts by like the hiring process, the way that we engage individuals to become a part of the workforce. So we put a lot around that, and then just ways to kind of think about the way we get people to participate in research. Who are the communities you're reaching out to? What is the language you're using? How are you recruiting them? What kind of materials do you use? So we have a lot of stuff around that. So if you're interested in that kind of thing.
Great. Good. So Caleb, you came up on my screen. You want to talk?
Sure.
The DOI finished? Thank you very much. Caleb's going to do this.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic work. It's tough act to follow, that one. So I don't want to. Some people have heard this story a couple times, but I'm making along with my partner Mika Peled, who's out in San Francisco, and some of you have had a chance to meet when he was up here last fall. It's amazing. It was a year ago. I mean, can you believe that was 1 year ago? We've been making a film about broadly speaking about MDMA-assisted psychotherapy, but it's really been following patients. It's not a whole bunch of interviews with experts. It's really following patients who have been, 4 patients who are subjects who have been in the phase 3 trials that are ongoing, the open label part of that, and 1 from the conjoint therapy trial that Dr. Mithofer and Candace Munson were running. And basically we met them beforehand, when they were still in a pretty dark place, followed them through the therapy process, and in one case, about a little more than 2 years afterwards, we just did a nice filming session with him. everyone for at least a year. So we've been able to see the process unfold and tell the story really through the ups and downs and the experience of the people who are going through this work. Of course, there's interviews with therapists, and there's other, some other interviews and work to give this some context. But it's a character-driven story to hopefully flesh out really what this is all about. I mean, it's just it's fascinating. I don't have to tell you guys how important this is, but we're hoping to bring this to a broader audience of people who are interested in mental health and well-being, who maybe hear little snippets of this and just seems kind of weird or unusual, or what is this? What's going on? And to feel like there's a really powerful story to tell. And I think telling it through these very relatable people who, most of them just kind of stumbled on it themselves. They were desperate for anything. They didn't come to this from the realm of they're interested in psychedelics somehow, and this is kind of interesting. They were, desperate for help, and they tried everything else. And at this point, I can tell you, we are now pretty much completely done filming with all of our main characters. They've all done fantastically well, which, if you follow this research, is not surprising, because the success rates or benefit is really, I mean, it's amazing compared to most trials of psychiatric therapies of any kind. So we were been on a slow progress since COVID. For a few reasons. Partly it was difficult and expensive to film, partly it was hard to approach either broadcasters or funders for the first several months of the pandemic. And of course, my partner and I were working on different projects about the pandemic. But since summer, we've picked up, and we've been editing, starting to get into edit. Having some good meetings with people who may be interested in doing this, trying to, when we get to the point of having a rough cut of the film. We just last week got a very nice grant from the Bronner Family Foundation. A lot of you guys know David Bronner from his work with MAPS. Of course, they were really behind the big vote in Oregon that was so exciting last week, or on election day. So that was a nice piece of news. And Mika and I are sort of putting our heads together for the next stretch. I think it's going to be on a slightly slower progress until early 2021, when I sort of get closer to finish with this vaccine film. But I'm going to be sending out a little more of an update to all you guys probably in the next week or two, and then we'll be we're thrilled to get this going. I mean, I think obviously the whole trial has been a little bit slowed down by the COVID situation. So I think we are hoping to have this completed and out in the world just as this is really hitting the FDA evaluations and consideration of what they're going to do with this. And as this approach to therapy really starts going out into the bigger world. I mean, it already is, but I think that's going to be a real. It's obviously going to be a tremendous milestone when these first approvals go up to the FDA. So we're hoping to sort of be more or less in tune with that.
Great. Thank you so much, Caleb. Exciting to hear that you're moving ahead with pulling it all together.
Yeah. It's a lot more fun than working on the vaccine project. I'll tell you that.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And then Mark Bates and Bob Kaufman to update us on the VET survey study. And Mark, you were giving us another update, which was fun earlier. If you want to talk about that as well, you certainly can.
Well, I'll just say quickly, this is Mark. Thank you. And I want to defer to Manish and Paul for more, because I didn't discuss with them how much to share, and I just want to be careful to let them be the first to share about this. And then I wanted to thank Bob for agreeing to share updates about our veteran study today. So I'll turn it over to him. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Well, greetings, everyone. I'd like to just update you a little bit on the harm reduction study that Mark and myself and a real august team of researchers are conducting. Our team is, for those of you that haven't heard about this research that we're conducting, the team's composed of Katinka Hoyer and Alan Davis and Rachel Yehuda, who are all three rock stars, and Eric Lund, who's an up-and-coming rock star and a very well-known veteran himself, Morgan Luttrell, and together we trying to understand what the unmet needs of veterans are, especially in the mental health world. And this is particularly important, realizing that 2/3 of veterans do not have their mental health needs met by current military treatment facilities and veteran affairs medical centers. And so this study is really looking at really what veterans' health priorities are with regards to potential healing with the use of psychedelics. The study's changed since we updated you all last. Now, we're not just looking at veterans that have experienced healing with psychedelics, but we're also looking at veterans who want to experience healing with psychedelics but have not yet. The study's also changed in that we've shortened it. We've focused more on outcomes and less on processes. Our study was over an hour before. Now it's 40 to 45 minutes. And Rachel Yehuda, who, as many of you know, and in the work that she's done, was particularly interested in questions of suicidality. Since we've changed IRBs now with Rachel's New York Mount Sinai and no longer with CIIS, we have a little more flexibility in terms of looking at issues of suicide in the veteran space. And as you know, that tends to be a very concerning and often dire situation for veterans, with 20 to 22 veterans taking their life each day. So hopefully we'll kick off the survey in March. Our funders have been very gracious and patient, and this is the way that studies sometimes sort of wiggle wobble in terms of changing the IRBs and methodology slightly, but we're certain that once we release this, which is largely going to be via snowball, word of mouth, with a couple of veteran social media platforms, that we think that we will have a pretty good turnout and really be able to provide some very useful information into veteran healing, what works and what doesn't.
Great, Bob. Thank you. How long do you expect it to take? And I know that's a naive question, but it's a hopeful question too.
The analysis, and you mean the complete study?
Yeah, sort of what's the timeline of gathering the data and then pulling it together? Yeah.
Mark, do you want to? You just did a review of the timeline. Do you want to update BPRG on our latest projection?
Sure, glad to. So our plan is to submit to the Mount Sinai our IRB in January, and then we'll run the study for about 3 to 4 months through June. Then take through October next year for analyzing the data, writing it up. So we're hoping to have results, meaningful results by the end of next year. And then, one of the first things in terms of deliverables is just basic harm reduction information that we can get out to veterans and people supporting veterans. But we also want to have nice, clean informational products for policymakers and leaders about what's going on in the veteran space with psychedelics, and then also conferences and publications. Is that?
Yeah, that's great. Thank
Great.
you. So a year from now, you'll be back to tell us the results.
That's our plan.
Sounds good. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Is there anyone else who's on the call who has an update that I have missed? People have been very efficient. I always get anxious that we're not going to have enough time, but thank you, everyone. And I may have shortchanged some of the early presenters in wanting to keep things moving, but anyone else I've missed? Okay. So if not, we're going to take now a 15-minute break because Rick isn't coming on until 1:45. So people can stay on and chat. They can move around, whatever, but we won't have the formal part. We'll resume that at 1:45 with Rick. Thank you.
Hi, Rick.
Hi.
Hey, Rick, thank you so much for squeezing us in. I know you're crazy busy.
Well, what I was doing, sorry I'm late, it was Stan Groff is having the Groff legacy training in the Czech Republic. So I was just asked to address about 50 of the holotropic breathwork trainees in the Czech Republic, and they had a translator. So it took longer to present because everything went half speed.
Well, we feel lucky to be in Stan's presence and yours, so thank you. Thank you. So we're curious to see what you can tell us.
Well, things are going tremendously well. We have had such incredible, well, let me just say overview. I think we've been going through the dark night of the soul in America, and it looks like we are emerging from that. But I do feel like so much of the deep work has not yet been done, that there is so much division and hatred and believing in fantasies and lies, that there is so much fear and anxiety still to process, that I don't think we're out of the woods yet. We just barely managed not to sink into authoritarianism. So I think it's really a great opportunity that we have, but we shouldn't take it for granted or to think that there might not be another backlash 4 years from now. And one of the reasons that I was so focused my life on psychedelics was to help people process fear and trauma and to realize our interconnectedness so we wouldn't have such divisions. So I think it's really important that in any ways that we can to help people that are so stuck in seeing the world as us and them and so trapped by fears and anxieties and fantasies. So that part has been, the election has been hopeful, but still way too close to call and too close to comfort, I mean, and a lot of work to do coming up to make sure that we sort of move in this new track. The results that we've had with the MDMA have been also just incredible. We were going to have a New York Times article coming out today or the next few days. And now that's not going to be happening. The more time that I spent with the New York Times reporter, the more he learned about all of the details of our study. What he wants to do is write a bigger story, major feature story, but once the scientific paper comes out. So that's going to be a couple months from now, because what we were going to be able to reveal, well, at least at this moment before the paper is published, is that our first study was statistically significant and that we had an excellent safety record. And that means that we feel that we're on track for success, that we have started the second phase 3 study. We've published a cost effectiveness study in the Open Journal +1, and that things are really looking good. We are thinking of the Lancet to submit the paper to. They have expedited review for randomized clinical trials. So it may be by the early in January, we hope that potentially then we could have the paper published. And so that's what the New York Times reporter is wanting to wait for. But they checked with the editors, and we can release the information that it was statistically significant with a good safety record without any more details to another media outlet. So now we're thinking about the Washington Post or something like that, just for people to know. What it also means is that we are now certain, I guess I would say, although I hesitate to say certain, but we've just finished a $30 million fundraising campaign, the Capstone campaign. I'd like to thank all of you who've helped us with that. And now we're persuaded that that is going to be enough money because we don't have to repeat our first phase 3 study. It was successful. We're convinced now that we have the capacity to generate all of the data that we need for FDA and also for Health Canada and the Ministry of Health in Israel. We think that FDA will go first, and then Israel and Canada's regulatory authorities will follow the FDA. They won't go first, but they will go second shortly after the FDA says yes. We're also aware that to make MDMA into a medicine, not only do you need FDA approval, but you need states have to reschedule the drug. And roughly half the states automatically reschedule if the FDA does, but the other half have all sorts of different procedures. Some of them, like California, require a law through the state legislature to reschedule the drug. And there are several states like that. Others require the Board of Pharmacy or different groups to decide to reschedule. And so we are now starting the process of developing strategies and timelines for roughly 25 states, which don't automatically reschedule with FDA. So even though it's a couple years away, we have to do a lot of political work to prepare the ground. Now, the results were so good, we currently are anticipating early 2023 for when we think FDA would say yes. We're also, just to share even more good news, we've been trying for 30 years to start research inside the VA. Rachel Yehuda at the Bronx VA now has FDA approval. We have a signed CRADA. Her IRB has had a preliminary meeting and they have approved the study. There's another meeting coming up. Then we have to get DEA approval. The Loma Linda VA has FDA approval. They have their local IRB approval. We have a signed CRADA, which is a cooperative research and development agreement between MAPS and the VA at Loma Linda, also at Bronx VA. And that's the Loma Linda is an investigator-initiated trial just as a proof of concept. What Rachel wants to do is compare 2 sessions versus 3 sessions. And then we will be having a group therapy study. We're just in the early stages of designing at the Portland VA. And then Rachel Yehuda would also do a group therapy after she gets experience with individuals. So everything is really, we just got a $50,000 donation from the Navy SEAL Foundation. So that's the first sort of military organization that has actually made a donation. And that's because so many Navy SEALs are going down to Mexico for Ibogaine or going down to South America for ayahuasca, that they have brought this news back that what the VA is offering them hadn't worked and psychedelic psychotherapy does work for them. So that's what got the Navy SEALs Foundation. We're also very deep into negotiations with therapists in charge of PTSD at Walter Reed. And we have approval for 10 expanded access or compassionate use sites. One of them is in Rockville, Maryland. And so we're hoping to get veterans and active duty soldiers from there to go to Rockville, Maryland for the expanded access. And we've got several $100,000 now to subsidize vets going through the study and also women of color. So we've got a lot of subsidies for patients to go through expanded access. We still could use more. And overall, we're about to start our eating disorder study with MDMA in Vancouver, Toronto, and Denver. We've got all the approvals for that. So it's just a tremendously exciting moment, and we see all the progress that's being made with psilocybin. But what I'm really looking forward, and I don't know if you talked about it before, is the religious leaders study. I think that from my perspective, I'll just share that politically, that's the most important psychedelic research study being done in the entire world. Because what it's about is, and Tony, I don't know if you want to, get, in a sense, let me just say that it's about, is there a common mystical core behind and underneath all the different religions? I mean, I know that the study is not designed to answer that question, but this idea is why I think the religious leader study is so important, is that if we can help people feel this unitive, the sense of connection, and feel it and know it, then the differences that we have between us that have been exploited by Trump and others to make us scared of the other, that we can appreciate differences knowing our underlying commonality. And I think potentially the religious leader study can speak to that a little bit. So is that a fair characterization, Tony? Or
I'll mute myself. Yeah, well said.
Good. Yeah. What is the time frame for reporting on that study?
Yeah, so as you know, we're tightly under wraps by many seniors telling us not to talk too much about it. But we hope to publish that the second half of next year.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I think it's really, really important, and it can start a whole new area of research.
It's really very exciting, and congratulations, Rick! Incredible news. Incredible news.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And one thing I've got a few minutes from now is we're doing a presentation to Stephen and Alexandra Cohn, and they're the ones that have funded half the money for the Johns Hopkins Center. They gave us $5 million out of the $30 million for Capstone. They're funding psychedelic research. They gave $4.5 million to USONA. And so we're briefing them later today on our phase 3 results, and then planting the seeds of Europe and globalization in hopes of future donations.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's hard for me not to get teary listening to all this. Having lived with you for the last 10 years or so, and you've lived it even longer, it's really magnificent. Thank you for all you're doing.
Well, Anne, could you maybe say a word about the people that you treated in the study that I'm just reporting?
Yeah, actually, as you were talking about it, so I've done my own little N of 3 follow-up in the last 3 weeks. Mike Alpert and I did 2, and Libby Call and I did 1, and all 3 of them were lucky enough to get the MDMA, and all 3 of them have said it's totally changed their lives. And they're just functioning at a much higher level. One had not been able, young woman hadn't been able to go to school. She's now completely enrolled in college and so excited to be doing that. And another one, I love this comment. She said, now that the world has COVID, they're living the way I've always lived with PTSD. So, but she has so much more empathy and she's so much more engaged in the world. So I'd say they're all doing amazingly well. They're continuing with therapy because that's what you need to do after the MDMA. So it's not a one and done and I'm fixed kind of thing, but they're so much more optimistic about their lives and are able to move forward. I mean, the cost effectiveness is, there's not a doubt about how cost effective this is for these people.
Yeah, a key part, it's so interesting that you say that all 3 are doing well, because a key part to getting such great statistical significance is 2 parts. One is that you have a significant difference between the treatment group and the control group, but the other is that you have low variability, that you have a lot of consistency in your outcomes. And it sounds like that's what you're finding.
Yeah, and these were people with very different stories. So to feel that universal optimism, particularly in a time like this, is just incredible. I mean, what a gift to them and to the world and to us being involved in it and seeing this.
The other thing I didn't share is that people had PTSD an average of over 20 years in the study. And we had one person in the study who had PTSD over 60 years.
Yeah.
So you can be stuck in these patterns for much of your life, for many, many decades, but you can still heal. That's, I think, the amazing part, is that these long-lived patterns that are chronic, that don't seem like they will ever change for people, that they still can change.
That's beautiful.
The other really significant thing too, hi Rick, it's Libby, is the attachment issues, because pretty much everybody we've seen they have some older trauma perhaps, but a lot of them also had the traumas happen early in their lives and in the context of significant attachment ruptures, and to see that population respond to a treatment is beyond fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, we had 30 of the 90 had their primary trauma from childhood.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think this well, Gould Dolan, who was the neuroscientist at Hopkins that did the study with mice with MDMA. And she talked about it as, promoting oxytocin, which promotes new neural connections, but that it opens this critical social reward learning window that's open mostly in childhood when we're doing these kind of attachment things. And so then people get stuck in these patterns. But with MDMA, you can actually reopen the potential for forming good attachments. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, as always, Rick, we could listen to you all day. Thank you so much for sharing all this.
Yeah, my pleasure to join you.
And yeah, and very good luck with the Cohens. We're all with you. We're cheering you on.
Thank you.
And you can stay as long as you're able. Tony's about to come on. But
oh, darn it. I'm supposed to prepare for the Cohens break. Actually, I'm 10 minutes late for that. But
you better go then.
So surprising. Never
I'd
happened.
love to hear you, Tony. I'm sorry. But money is my driving motivation these days.
That's more important. Go do your job.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick. Congratulations.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Whew. Okay. Do any of the other MAPS therapists, we have 4 minutes till Tony's, and I know some people are coming on just when Tony starts, which is why I'm sticking to it, but any of the other MAPS therapists want to say a sentence or two about what the experience was like here in Boston?
Sure, I can go ahead.
Thank you, Mike.
Hi, guys. So as a lot of you are aware, I'm Ann's therapy partner for the MAP1 trial. So I don't have a ton to add beyond what she was saying, but I will echo how transformative the experience really was for the 2 patients who I saw along with her. And when I heard about the results for the early studies with Michael and Annie, my reaction was that it was just too good to be true. I was coming to this from the perspective of a psychiatrist who saw that most of what we had available for PTSD just wasn't working super effectively. And seeing people go through this process in real time, the amount that can shift over the course of an 8-hour session, it really, the data speak for themselves. And also I think these individual experiences really back it up. And we've seen just some very, very profound shifts beyond anything they could have possibly imagined happening in that time course. Yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Anyone else? Susan or Francis or Jim, are you on? I'm not sure you are anymore. Okay. We've all been on at certain times and it's a wonderful team. Great. Well, I think we had enough stretching before, so we can go move on to Tony. So thank you everyone for being here. As always, it's wonderful to see so many people who I know and love, so many people who I am seeing for the first time. Welcome. It's an extraordinary community. So most of you are here, you had the link, so you probably have read Tony's bio. And I think one of the reasons that I really wanted Tony to talk to us, not only is he one of the pioneers, having been at NYU for all these years working with the psilocybin, he also brings to the religious leader, which we heard about already, he brings to this work just a huge heart. And so Tony has been a teacher of mine at CIS, and then I've had the pleasure of getting to know him and just admire the way he approaches this work so much. He's done beautiful presentations with Mary Casamano. They talking about how love is so important in this work, and I do think that's an important message for us all to hear. So I'm going to turn it over to Tony. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Anne. I'm moved by that. Thank you so much for those words. That means a lot to me. And thank you to Dick and Ron as well for inviting me to this very distinguished group. This is really, it's my first time coming to the full group, and it's really remarkable what you've put together here. So glad to be here, humbled to be here, and thank you so much. Anne had asked me to speak for about 30 minutes. I'll speak or present. I don't want to make it so formal, but I did put some slides together and we'll go through some of them, but maybe not all of them. And then we could have a 30-minute conversation or Q&A as you had asked as well. And there's so much, and I hope everyone's okay in this incredible time we find ourselves in. I'm going to speak today a bit about the role of medicine, these medicines in palliative care and in existential distress. And as we find ourselves in this incredible time, it's as if it's one big Dharma lesson on death. It's as if, you know, the veil has been pulled back a bit, and the fleeting nature of this and the impermanent nature of it is so obvious and so palpable, as is what truly matters. And you know, I think everyone on this group forum would agree that's the heart of the work we do. It is to kind of, you know, highlight and reveal how fleeting this material world is, but what might also be beyond that in terms of what fulfills us and what the values are about that. And by the way, thank you, Rick. I know Rick is gone, but I want to thank him for his incredible research and his nod to the religious leaders, which I agree is going to be hopefully very important. So the work in palliative care and end of life has been a primary focus of mine, as many of you know. And as this field grows so rapidly, it's incredible seeing all the things happening. Just incredible. It's, you know, within 3 years, Dick and I were talking before in one of the breakout rooms, in 3 years, we've seen so much change. When we began this back in 2008 or 9 or 7, there was nothing going on. Hopkins was doing their incredible work, and Charlie Grove had done his incredible work at UCLA, and that was kind of it. And we kind of whispered we were doing this, but we weren't talking about it overtly. It was kind of behind closed doors. And here we are in this incredible zeitgeist with all this research, all these studies, all the good work coming out, books that are talking about it in good ways. And I just feel strongly, I know everyone here does, as we go into the future, into this rapidly changing, unfolding future, to keep our eye on, to respect where we come from, both in terms of the elders and the pioneers from the first wave, and also in terms of the mystical experience itself, where that comes from within consciousness and our great world traditions and religions. And, you know, we stand upon some incredible shoulders in terms of the researchers, and then of course, going back to indigenous and ancient cultures. So it's humbling to kind of, for a brief moment in time, be around to pass the torch along to the next group of persons. And looking back, as I think you will know, the two indications to come out of the first wave was for alcoholism and for end-of-life distress, for cancer distress. And so it was the founding indications for the research that we're also lucky to be involved in, standing upon the work of, you know, Bill Richards spoke here a few months ago, who he was involved in the first studies, Stan Groff, of course, and Walter Pankey and others, part of that first wave, who really laid the foundation for end-of-life work with the psychedelics. So I want to talk a bit about where we've been with that in terms of the history, a brief walk through where we've been, a brief walk through how we don't die well in America. We're getting better, and the palliative care and hospice and end-of-life communities are clearly improving things. We have end-of-life doulas and death over dinners, and there's books out, and we're getting better at speaking about the big taboo, but we still have a ways to go. And then I want to talk a bit about our findings that we found a couple of years ago that hopefully most people know about, but I know there are newcomers here as well, that Hopkins and NYU published in terms of cancer. And then where do we go from here? And where there's a few studies in palliative care that we're about to launch, hopefully be up and running sometime next year. I'm very excited about. And, you know, Ralph Metzner, one of our pioneers and dear friends, also echoed I'm echoing him, about this being seemingly the most important contribution of the medicines. And I want to just read what he said Ralph wrote that experiencing the transcendence of your physical identification with the certain knowledge that your essence, your spiritual core, your soul persists beyond the boundary of bodily death is without doubt the most precious gift that psychedelic experiences can provide. And it's hard not to agree with that. There's so many applications for these incredible experiences, and it's the experiences, not the medicines. We're talking about these medicine-generated experiences that have been occurring for thousands of years. But it just seems if we can die better without that incredible experience we all fear about the end of life, what a gift is humanity. And as we go forward, and one final editorialization here, it behooves us, all of us, to help educate the public. As someone said today, many people said earlier, the public thinks, what is this? What are these medicines about? And it behooves us to provide education. People don't know, and it's not their fault. We need to educate people as to what these are, how they help, these experiences that are so crucial. And sometimes the media portrays it as all peaches and cream and all joy and ecstasy. That's certainly a part of our deep foundations of who we are. But it's also very difficult work, and it's really an encounter with suffering. And I think in terms of cancer distress and end-of-life distress, it's about being with suffering in a very different way. It's about transforming suffering, but coexisting with suffering and with doubt. Paul Tillich once said wonderfully, doubt isn't the opposite of faith. Doubt is an element of faith. And so people tell us, so many volunteers, and that these experiences allow us to walk along with doubt and with death and with dying, but hopefully not so crippled by it as so many people are. So with that, I'll show a few slides. And Sherry, am I doing the right thing here? So ready for share screen?
Yep, you can just share.
Okay. This always gets to be a now I don't see my thing. I see desktop. Oh, wait. I think we have something. We might have liftoff. Houston? Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Sherry. You provided assurance and support. so well needed. You're a good guide. I'm going to walk through a few slides, and then we're going to, for 25 minutes or so, and talk a bit about where we've been, where we are, and maybe where we're going. And I look forward to the conversation with everyone about this. And I know there are palliative care people. Ivana's here, and it's so heartening to see the new work being done around palliative care. Manish and his group, and Paul in Maryland, doing great work with their group work with cancer distress. And it's such an important part of these experiences. And it's really exciting to see the field grow this way. So before I start, before I forget, that relief on the first slide is the Buddha on his deathbed, and with the message that we don't have to die in the way of the severe anguish, and we could die with dignity, and we could die well, or a good death, as the palliative care practitioners talk about. And that's oops, now it's not clicking. Let me see. Okay. And speaking of the Buddha, let me just these are allegedly the final words of the Buddha, and they speak to this topic. And if you don't mind, I'll just read them and we'll go forward. Do not grieve, even if I were to live in the world for as long as a kalpa, which is an era. Our coming together would have to end. You should know that all things in the world are impermanent. Coming together inevitably means parting. Do not be troubled, for this is the nature of life. Diligently practicing right effort, you must seek liberation immediately. Within the light of wisdom, destroy the darkness of ignorance. Nothing is secure. Everything in this life is precarious. Always wholeheartedly seek the way of liberation. All things in this world, whether moving or non-moving, are characterized by disappearance and instability. Stop now, do not speak. Time is passing. I'm about to cross over. This is my final teaching. So may that be a teaching for all of us as we go forward. And every time I click that button, it doesn't work. Let's do it this way. Oops. Okay. So just a quick walk through the past and then to the present and to the future. There's a mountain of literature on how we don't die well. I won't present you and bore you with lots of data, but just quickly, there's such a call for healthcare to improve how we die in America. It's already, over 2 decades ago where the Institute of Medicine made a mandate to approve the care at the end of life. I don't know why this isn't working. But increasingly, still, depression in the final year has increased by 26% in a recent study. Depression, hopelessness, are strong predictors for a desire for a hastened death. And there's so much literature out of Sloan Kettering supporting that. People die with what's called demoralization syndrome, which is actually a characteristic and a feature we're going to try to look at in a new study, and we did in our past studies as well, which is an awful state of hopelessness and meaninglessness and existential distress. For those of you who aren't in palliative care, in the old days you would say show of hands in an audience. Now we're on Zoom, so I don't know who's who. But it affirms life in regards to death as a normal process. It neither hastens nor postpones death. And spiritual and meaning making and values are important in reviewing one's life. And I want to just include this study really quick. There was a very big study looking at all the important features in end-of-life care, what patients and physicians and families found important. And the 2 most prominent features are meaning and transcendence. And I really think this study, which is wasn't about psychedelics, obviously, really forms the foundation for our work. Because if I had to characterize what's transformative for so many people with cancer or at the end of life about the experience, the mystical or peak experience, which we're going to talk about as well, is that it's meaning making and it provides this transcendent experience that can be so profound if one is losing their body. And if one is, the body's beginning to not work and will stop. And just briefly, meaning and spirituality has been really acknowledged in palliative care to be important features and important constructs, and that we need more of it. And there's been a paucity of it for years, and there's a real call to have more of it. And I think in many ways, our research, the psychedelic field, really responds to that call for a meaning-making, transcendent-based psychotherapeutic modality. And the great Viktor Frankl, who I'm sure you all know, who developed logotherapy, which was a meaning-making psychotherapy and was a Holocaust survivor, had written, meaning can be found in life literally up to the last moment, up to the last breath, even in the face of death. And Cicely Saunders talks about, we can find wholeness as we die. We're not going to, and there's a great quote, I think it's coming up, by Kubler-Ross about to be healed at the end of life is not about being physically healed. It's not about having your disease healed. People can be healed at the moment of death, in death. It's about a spiritual healing, not the alleviation of the physical disease. And it goes back thousands of years. There's so much emerging literature on indigenous cultures and ancient cultures using entheogens or psychedelics or psychoactive compounds for rituals and spiritual purposes, but there were many also used to glimpse into what death might be, including ancient Greece at the famous Eleusinian mysteries. People like Plato and Cicero would march from Athens and spend times in these mystery schools drinking kykeon, which was believed to be an ergot alkaloid, and they would write about this glimpse into what death might be and allow them to live more fully in the present. And I can read some quotes from you later from both of them on their experiences. And while I'm on the Eleusinian mysteries, I want to give a shout out to a good friend who has a wonderful book out, if you folks don't know, called The Immortality Key, which is a really scholarly, elegant book exploring the the possibilities of entheogens being used at Eleusis, which we know through Hoffman and Rook and Wasson that they existed, we believe they existed, but also lingering for centuries, maybe even into the early years of Christianity. So I do want to recommend that book highly for you. I was lucky to be there many, many years ago, and that's the chief archaeologist. And they would march from Athens, all the scholars of the day, all the major leaders of the day, to have the experience and then go back to their homes, hopefully being transformed. We also know in the Rig Veda, there's mention of Soma to become immortal, to transcend the body. And of course, numerous mentions in the Mayan culture and elsewhere. So there's a history of these medicines used throughout human history for transforming our fear of death and what death might be. And what many of you know, and I want to just highlight quickly, is that in the Hopkins literature, and Mary's here, Mary Casamano, our nation's premier therapist. I know that embarrasses her. She's very humble, but she is. Their research and our research has supported them in this, is that what appears to be the mediating factor of these experiences is the mystical experience. 2/3 of respondents in most of the Hopkins studies and in NYU as well had this mystical or peak or numinous experience that correlated with positive outcome. And I want to briefly walk through these, only a few features of what the mystical experience is, because it's really important. And it's the foundation of where we spring our work from. And Bill Richards and Walter Pankey developed these scales back in the early 1960s, and we still use them today. They've been revised a bit, and we have better research methods these days, but it's the same features. And one is the subjective sense of unity, that a person in this experience senses all things are connected. All people and things are connected. All is one. The noetic quality, a feature coined by William James, that one is encountering ultimate reality. People rarely say, or never, that was a drug effect. That wasn't a real experience. They come back and say, that was ultimate reality. That was encompassing reality. A sense of sacredness, awe, humility, holiness, and wonder. Deeply felt positive moods like joy, blessedness, peace, and we'll speak about love in a bit. And had mentioned love and Mary's great lectures around, this incredible foundation of love people experience, self-loving kindness towards self, towards others, and of a broader kind of love that I like to call agape, to use the Greek word. And we'll talk a bit about that. And the ineffability, it transcends language. It's hard to speak about, but people do. And we're all moved by the vignettes and the narratives people write. And hopefully I could read to you some today as well. And what I do think is the most incredible feature of these experiences, particularly the end-of-life patients, for the dying patient, is this experience of transcendence. The sense of transcending time and space, of this body, of this consensus reality. And for the person whose body is dying and will soon not be functioning, this insight they cultivate through these experiences that they report to us, that they're not only their body. I'm not my body, I'm not my cancer, that there's something enduring about who I am, what I am. And that may transcend this body. It may transcend, this consensus reality. That's a profound gift to someone who's dying. And that's been so much of what they report to us, that they recalibrate how they see death and how they see suffering. And they place it in a much larger landscape as we pull the lens back, so to speak, on whatever all this is, through transcendence. We see our suffering, we see death, we see this body in a much larger panoramic field, a cosmic field. And that's so often what's been very moving by these experiences. And Kubler-Ross and Eric Cassell and so many others have said healing is the personal experience of the transcendence of suffering. Abraham Maslow, the great American psychologist, wrote about peak experiences being the core of all this, of all religion, and it's the core transcendent experience. And Einstein, who I think was a modern day mystic, wrote that the most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. So this mystical experience, as you all know, there was a very important study in '62 by Walter Pahnke and at the Marsh Chapel, not too far from some folks in Boston. In 2006, Hopkins replicated this data that healthy people with psilocybin compared to control had what mirrored what we call naturally occurring mystical experiences, those features with psilocybin. And that's, again, been shown in our research with end-of-life care to be such a profound experience. And we were just there recently, a few of us on this, Mary was there. We were there for an event in Harvard in January in Boston, right before the shutdown. It feels like a lifetime ago, January. And we went to visit the room. This is Marsh Chapel, where the study took place, where Walter Pahnke did this study with theology students, half on psilocybin, half on niacin. And so there's and Yvonne was there too, and Yvonne was on this thread. Let me just run through this quickly. But the important part of the slide is that, folks, people, many people have these mystical experiences. We're wired for them. I like to say we're wired for meaning, but it's pushed out of our cultural lexicon. I really think it's a birthright, these incredible experiences. And I think kids have them all the time. And this study by Pew showed half of Americans report having glimpses of these experiences, but we just don't talk about them. Alan Watts talks about us pushing them out of the language of who we are. And it shouldn't be. It's the language of religion, but that also is problematic in some ways. But it's surely the language of the genesis of spirituality and religion, these incredible transcendent mystical experiences. And Aldous Huxley is really one of the pioneers of this research, of the not the research, but of the idea of using these medicines with the dying. And his incredible perennial philosophy is really characterizing the core of all religions, is this mystic core. And Rick was talking about it before. That's what binds them all together. And each religion began, or moral tradition began with this mystical experience by a person or persons, or a series of persons over years. And they built a symbolic framework and rituals around that experience. The unfortunate thing is, the very sad thing is that over the generations, the mystical experience is kind of washed away, and they keep just the silos of the beautiful symbols and frameworks, which are important, but we need to remember where they spring from, and it's the mystical experience. And bit of history, that's a handwritten note by Aldous Huxley when he was dying. As many of you know, he had asked his wife, Laura, to inject him with LSD, and that's the note. LSD, try it, 100 mics. The day John F. Kennedy was assassinated, by the way, the same day. And Sidney Cohen, one of the early pioneers, wrote also that death must become a more human experience, and psychedelics may one day provide a technique for altering the experience of dying. And I'm happy to say we're almost there, thanks to him and many others. So in terms of the research, the first wave, there was a number of studies. Here are the main clinical trials that were done, and Bill Richards is a major person in all this research at Spring Grove. And that was mainly with not psilocybin, it was mainly with LSD and DPT, primarily LSD. At the very end, there was somewhat psilocybin. And as Bill has said many times, the last patient having an experience in 1977 was, I think, given psilocybin by Bill at Spring Grove. Then there was a long dry spell, very sadly. The medicines were made out of the reach of the culture and also out of clinical research. And then the second wave, if I can call it that, are the recent studies, UCLA, NYU, and Johns Hopkins, all with psilocybin. And there's Albert Hoffman on your left, or my left, I'm not sure where it's on your slide, and Walter Pahnke in the middle, and the great Helen Bonney, who created the music list for the patients in the studies, and we still use much of that music today. So in terms of the NYU study, it was 1 dose of psilocybin with a 7-week gap, then a placebo, which was niacin. And I just want to show you some of the data. Before that, there's a few brief quotes from people in our study after their study. And many of these people have since passed away. And they really were teachers to all of us, and they're the pioneers. They're really the ones setting the stage for the future. This changed my life. I can't even imagine it, referring to her fear of cancer. I felt this constant state of becoming. I felt gratitude like I've never felt before in my life. I felt totally welcome. Death doesn't matter. So a woman who was close to death said those words. I'm less afraid of death. Death is part of life. Right now, I have no fear of recurrence of cancer. While most people in our study had cancer in a variety of phases, most stage 3 and stage 4 cancers, 1 or 2 were in remission, but were crippled by their anxiety. And this is one of those people speaking. In the sense that one is eternal, and you hear this kind of the same language out of the Hopkins research and all those clinical trials. It's really this mystical language of being eternal and being engulfed by love and being part of the fabric of all unfolding. And everything is love, and we'll spend more time on that in a little bit. That's a wonderful team from way back then. That's the room, and actually the day of my first session or second session with the participants. So you see, it's in a hospital setting, but a really comfortable living room-like setting with a very expensive rug that blew half the budget. And as you all know, but for the newcomers, there's 3 main phases. A preparation phase. Set and setting is crucial. Set being the mindset of the person, setting where and how it's done. Intention. In this case, of course, people were coming in because of their cancer distress, and intention of being more at ease with dying, connecting more to their loved ones, and various things surrounding end-of-life experience. The mantra that Bill Richards taught us many years ago, to trust the experience, trust the medicine, trust the guides, let go, be open, and to trust consciousness, to trust the wisdom of our interior and where it takes you. We encourage people to cultivate a posture of moving into experience, the unfolding changes as they occur, no matter how difficult. They're all not pleasant experiences. The encounter with self and with death and with consciousness is often very complicated. And but by moving into it directly with assurance from us if they need it, that's when the teachable moments seem to appear. That's when the insight opens up. And we'll talk more about that as well. There's the medication session. It's an all-day session with eye shades and earphones to encourage moving into the experience and distracting from the outside world. And then we have a few weeks of integration sessions. Quickly, our data, for those who don't know it, anxiety and depression were all remarkably reduced in the psilocybin cohort. Rick was speaking before about these effect sizes. He gave incredible sizes of 0.9 that he has. And here you see these delta scores of 1 point various numbers. So really robust effect sizes, not usually seen in psychotherapy trials or psychopharm trials. Rick was mentioning how Prozac and Zoloft even have these much lower effect sizes. The pink line, I can't point to it here, I don't think, but the pink line is the psilocybin, the blue is the placebo group, and you see the drug administration line coming down. As soon as the day after the administration, we see this incredible drop in anxiety and depression on the HADS. And here we see the anxiety scale, same thing. Day of administration, it drops. If we continue this scale, this timeline, at the 7-week marker, then the psilocybin person then takes the placebo, and placebo then takes psilocybin. They serve as their own control, and the 2 lines eventually meet. This is the state trait anxiety inventory. Again, these incredible effect sizes. You see pink being the psilocybin, and this is the pre-crossover score, which really is the one that matters in terms of measuring impact of psilocybin versus placebo. And these are embedded within a 2 or 3 week preparatory therapeutic setting and integration. Depression on the heads. Again, you see the drug administration date, and then this incredible drop in psilocybin versus the placebo. Another depression one. This is really important, everyone. Demoralization and hopelessness are two awful experiences associated with demoralization that I showed you earlier from that earlier slide. And the drop in the psilocybin versus the placebo is significant at the 2-week marker. And death transcendence is from a Ralph Hood article, but this experience of that death is transcended through identification with something more enduring than oneself, which is a remarkable experience for a dying person to have. 70% of the participants rated as the 5 most meaningful, significant experience of their lifetime, including single most, over 50% as the most spiritually significant, and almost 90% reported an improvement in general well-being and life satisfaction. So I'm happy to report this new study we did earlier this year. Gabby Egan-Liebes led this study, and we tracked down the folks who were still surviving. About 2/3 have passed away, but the surviving cancer patients and those that 1 or 2 that didn't have cancer but had a cancer anxiety, we re-administered some of the measures. And this is 4.5 years later. And you see the anxiety, depression, the 6 of the scales here, at the 4.5 year marker, still dropping, being consistent from 4.5 years earlier. Full disclosure, now this is already past crossover, and 4.5 years have went by, so other variables could be affecting these measures, but I think we think they're still very impactful to see these results. And these 2 constructs, again, 4.5 years later after their dosing, after the psilocybin session. This was published early this year in the Journal of Psychopharmacology. Persisting effects, let me just run through this. So the summary of our findings, by the way, these findings are very, very congruent with the Hopkins findings. There were 2 separate studies published together with slightly different protocols, but overall very similar, and in terms of how we prepare and integrate sessions. And their data was a mirror image of ours, so that was very important for the research going forward. There were no serious adverse effects. Some had nausea, some had a headache the next day, some mild elevation of blood pressure. Up to 80% had a significant result at the end of the study, 9 months later, with depression and anxiety. Really important, again, to highlight that this mystical experience, with Rudolf Otto called the peak, the numinous experience, with Maslow called peak. It's known by many names. There isn't one name to describe it. But that experience has been associated with so much of the positive outcomes. And it really begs the question, what is that experience? Are we wired for meaning? Is that our birthright? Is that part of pure awareness? And is that what religion, the foundations of religion, spring from? Of course, decreasing demoralization, improving quality of life. And this is Patrick, who many of you may know from the Michael Pollan book. And Patrick was just an incredible guy who I miss. He passed away about a year after his experience. Michael had wrote about his book, his experience after meeting his wife. And his wife spoke about it. And we used Patrick's words. Patrick was nice enough to allow us to use the words, and his wife was, and his narrative was beautiful. And I won't read it all now. If I have time later, we can read some more narratives later. But essentially, he said that love was everything. But Patrick had a lovely life. He was a young guy in his 50s. This is a week before he passed away, by the way, this picture. And he looks incredible. Actually, when I said goodbye to him for the last time, I was pretty shaken up and I was tearful. And he just said to me, "It's all going to be okay." It was a remarkable passing that he had, and that his wife Lisa has told over and over again. And Patrick wrote, and he said part of his narrative was, love was the only consideration. Everything that happened, anything that happened, and all that was seen and heard centered on love. It was and is the only purpose. There are no words to describe my experience, my state, or this place. And he goes on for pages describing in such an elegant way. He was a journalist. This experience of love. And he had a great life. He was a journalist. He owned restaurants. He was a musician. And this really, his said, was the defining moment of his experience and helped him to a better death. Patrick characterized the experience as the single most spiritually important experience of his lifetime. And in the end, he said, undoubtedly, my life has changed in ways I may never fully understand, but I now have an understanding, an awareness that goes beyond intellect. That my life, that every life, that all is the universe equals one thing, love. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Zen monk, writes, our true nature is the nature of no birth and no death. Only when we touch our true nature can we transcend the fear of non-being, the fear of annihilation. And I wonder, is that what people are experiencing? That space. And there's a great quote in Mount Athos. It's a peninsula in Greece where the oldest Orthodox monasteries are. There's a quote among the top of St. Paul's Monastery. I was fortunate enough to go there many years ago. And the quote is, if you die before you die, then you won't die when you die. And people look at that and they come by the monastery and, well, what does that mean? Well, we know what that means, right? If you had this death-birth experience while you're alive, then you live fully and you don't die the way you would have died. And it's just a remarkable line. And closing up shop here, Kenneth Ring, who does all this wonderful near-death experience, who did all this wonderful near-death experience research, also says that of all the lessons of the near-death experience, none is greater than the primacy of love. And what the near-death experience, or the NDE, teaches about love is that everything is love, is made of love, and comes from love. And we see this language over and over in NDE research and end-of-life research, and of course throughout the psilocybin psychedelic clinical trials, this experience of that. And I like to describe it in these three tiers, although they really aren't categories, but it's a sense of self-love and forgiveness that people offer themselves, for others in their life, including earlier in their life, including forgiveness and loving people who may have done them harm. And then this sense of love being the ground of being, to paraphrase Paul Tillich, that everything is made of this substance that we call love, but of course it has no language. I'm just going to stop here. That's a wonderful quote by Joan Halifax. You can read it briefly, but she speaks about this need to transcend birth and death as people talk about. And we see these words come to life in our research. And these trials are not easy. They're not easy. They're difficult at times. But people connect with such a sense of, through transcendence, a sense of connectivity, and live the final days in a more full way. And so the implications, of course, are obvious. That improves emotional well-being at the end of life. It can really change and transform assumptions about what is life and death. And I want to mention that not everyone has the mystical experience. The research shows consistently about 2/3 have that peak experience. But the other experiences aren't less in any way. The autobiographical, psychodynamically oriented experience are profound. To revisit earlier phases of our life and to relive earlier interpersonal relational experiences and find comfort in resolving those experiences internally. And some people don't have the experience of that. This transcends all, and somehow consciousness continues. Some say, no, it ends. But I'm so grateful for having lived this one life. And that's a profound gift to any of us. And of course, implications for consciousness. What is consciousness? Where is consciousness? We don't know. Has it always existed? Is it the ground of being? And what endures, if anything? Is it love, as some people and our patients have said? And just in closing, to Albert Hoffman and Gordon Wasson, who it's always good to pay tribute to. Hoffman, who discovered LSD, and Gordon Wasson, who, with Maria Sabina, brought psilocybin back to the West, mushrooms. And I want to close with a quote from Albert Hoffman a few years before he passed away. Alienation from nature and the loss of the experience of being part of the living creation is the greatest tragedy of our materialistic era. Therefore, I attribute absolute highest importance to consciousness change. I regard psychedelics as catalyzers for this. They are tools which are guiding our perception toward other deeper areas of human existence, so that we again become aware of our spiritual essence. Psychedelics in a safe setting can help our consciousness open up to the sensation, connect, being one with nature. It is my great concern to separate psychedelics from the ongoing debate about drugs and to highlight its potential inherent for self-awareness, for therapy, and for fundamental research into the human mind. Thank you very much. Let me, Sherry, I'm gonna stop screen share so I can see people. Is that okay?
Yes, that's good.
This way, good. Okay, great. So we have a little less than a half an hour, actually. I'm sorry for that, but thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Tony. That was really, really beautiful. And so now is time for questions. If people want to put them in the chat, please do. I have one and I have a few queued up,
Great.
But don't be shy about putting questions in the chat.
And before the Q&A, and before the questions come, just a quick caveat or an end note or a coda. More to come. So there, I mentioned Manish and his group at Maryland doing cancer work with psilocybin. Work at NYU. Steve's getting going some studies hopefully next year with cancer and psilocybin. Charlie Grobe and I and Brian Anderson are cultivating a multi-site trial, maybe 4 or 5 sites with psilocybin in palliative care patients. So there's a lot to come hopefully in the next year or so. And it's really, really exciting. And I'm happy to report that.
Yes. And Yvonne is getting one started at the Dana-Farber soon.
Yvonne's been a giant. So yes, forgive me for omitting that one. Yes.
No.
And Yvonne, speaking of Yvonne, so he put together this great group in January at Harvard that was a wonderful weekend, really a special weekend of partnering psychedelic researchers and palliative care experts, some of the biggest names in the field, and coming together for 3 days and kind of brainstorming how to go forward. And they've already published papers and are publishing papers that sprang from this weekend. And that was right before COVID. It just feels like really 5 years ago. And that was great. So Yvonne's been a really incredible doing work and is a visionary.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for the shout out. And congrats for all the work. And thank you. Like we're really staying on the shoulders of giants.
We really are. We really are. Thank you, Yvonne.
My question, Tony, stems from a wonderful webinar that from a couple of weeks ago, sponsored by the Harvard Divinity School, which I think you and I talked about a little bit. And it featured our own BPRG member, Rachel Peterson, and then Rita Powell, who was one of your participants. She mentioned your name, so I think it's okay that we mention that publicly. That the discussion was entitled Medicalizing Mysticism. And so my question is, can you address that? And I know it's a huge issue, but I do think it's something, as we're so focused on getting these medicines legal, so we're working within the FDA construct, which I completely support and understand, but how do we in this field hold on to the mysticism that also goes along with these medicines?
Yeah, so important. And obviously I won't give an answer that will satisfy myself or anyone here. But first, I do want to just highlight or underscore what you're getting at. And I hope that I got across today briefly the importance of that experience, that's the experience. Yes, there are other experiences that could be associated with these medicines, but the literature on that going back thousands of years and among the pioneers from the first wave points over and over again, and the Hopkins research bears out, and now others are doing that, that when that experience is had, there's such an incredible sense of connection to love and to so many things. Not all easy if you're dying, but incredible transformative effects. So first, I hope we can maintain that language. You know, a few of us worry, or maybe worry is the wrong word, maybe it's the right word, but that in this age of rapidly expanding research and such the importance of the biological brain imaging, it's so crucial. How do these brains, whatever these are, connect to mind in that way? But that in the course of the biological, that it doesn't become a biological reductionism and just another Prozac, just another medicine you take and then you're not depressed. That we maintain the language and the lineage that when the medicines work, and I don't consider these drug studies per se in part, but they're about the experience. That this experience they were wired for that happens naturally throughout human history, the memory of that experience is what's recalibrating people so dramatically. And so one, that we maintain that experience and call it what you will, it doesn't really matter, but it's more than just a change in neurochemical transmission that happens and then the effects last for decades. We need to know the brain, how that works. And there's such incredible people doing imaging in London and here with all that. But we have to maintain this understanding of what's happening. In terms of the word medicalizing mysticism, it's a funny combination of words, maybe an oxymoron. But yeah, I think we have to, what we're doing is going to go forward with clinical trials and hopefully rescheduling these medicines so we can have centers and locations and places where people can go for preparation, for the experience, for the integration, then go back to their homes, just like in Eleusis. And if you call that mystical experience, fine. But that they remain the heart of the work. And now we continue to create the setting for these experiences that we now know how to do, thanks to the pioneers. And we're in this tenuous time of, everything changing so rapidly, but that we keep our eye on that, including for the future of understanding what religion is, what is spirituality. They all seem to spring from this experience, from this mystic core, I would suggest, of who we are.
Thank you. Beautiful answer. Thank you. Ron Siegel, do you have a question you'd like to ask Tony?
First, Tony, thank you so much for sharing your experience, wisdom with us, and for your research, which is really moving and great. My question, I'm going to give you a brief context for the question. The question is about the role of SET in terms of expectations and orientation in using psilocybin in end-of-life care. And the context is just a personal one. I was 17, had a profound mystical experience that was set up in some ways by following some of members of the group will remember the Psychedelic Experience book from Leary, and I don't think he was Ram Dass at the time, and Ralph Metzner. And indeed, it happened, right? And I wound up a religion major instead of a mechanical engineer. So obviously, that set worked then. And then when as I look over the course of a life, I notice how more frequently concerns about death, impermanence, and the like arise as I get older. And so my question is there something about knowing that you have a terminal illness? I mean, we all have a terminal illness, but knowing that the end is near contributes to the set that contributes to mystical experiences more broadly, or a particular kind of mystical experience for folks who are facing death, who know they're facing death imminently.
It's a great question, and I want to respond to that. I first want to say, good for you for not becoming an engineer. And I can mirror that story. I was going to be a lawyer back in the 1970s. And I encountered this world, and now I'm not a lawyer. I went a different direction. So one less lawyer in the world, which is a good thing, at least for the lawyers. I wouldn't have been a good lawyer. Maybe you would have been a good engineer. So it's a great question. It even, if I heard you correctly, it even kind of speaks to the possibility that we administer these experiences at the earlier stage of the trajectory of a terminal illness or of a potentially threatening terminal illness, not at the end only. Um, I, I think that's where it's heading eventually. I mean, palliative care, for those who are here in the field, know that it's not hospice care. Palliative care is the discipline defined as the moment you're diagnosed with a potentially life-threatening disease. So why not have people at that earlier shock moment of hearing the news, of having of having these,
You move.
of having these experiences. And if I'm hearing you correctly, let me know if I am. Does the end of life experience influence the set to some degree that it facilitates these more powerful experiences? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, it would seem, but many people, were earlier in the stage. So there were two people, one or two who were in remission. She was a recurrence, had a very, very powerful experience because she's been kind of in the media years ago. And she's also Michael Pollan's book. That was The Atheist. She's lovely, Dinah, who said I was bathed in love, despite being an atheist, God's love. But I think it's a great question. And I think, the earlier wave was all end of life patients for the most part. So that'll be interesting to spread it out along the timeline of disease. But so, yeah, I think it's important, but of course I can't fully answer that with that because our cohort was mostly advanced cancer, but not all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Penelope Tarasuk, you had a question. Is she on? Oh, I can read it if she's not on. Or go to another one.
Here we go. All right.
Great.
Tony, thank you so much. My question is about your religious leaders study. I'm fascinated and I want to know a lot more. Thank you.
So I'm going to profoundly disappoint you, and forgive me in advance.
Yes.
We're on we haven't published it yet. It's still unfolding, and the two teams and our respective universities have really we've agreed to not discuss much. So I don't have it anyway. The findings aren't there. What I can say, the study aside, is that what Rick was alluding to earlier, and I may have, hopefully I was clear in my little brief words before, that if this is the mystic core of all the world religions, if they spring from that same experience with different names, the Tao, Christ consciousness, Sunyata, we have a lot of ways to say it. What does that say about the future of religion? What does that say about the importance of religion? And what could religious leaders tell us if those experiences were somehow brought back into the fold, which they were. So I can't say much, and forgive me for disappointing you. But yeah, we're looking forward to it. It's a great study, and the larger topic of that is consciousness. Look at these medications, these experiences tell us about consciousness. We know so little. And also, could it add to the way we observe the nature of reality? For so many years now, we've had the scientific method, an important one. But could it lean towards the scientific study of reality to go back to, as another approach, the qualitative, subjective, phenomenological understanding of an experience? And if enough humans have an experience, thousands of humans over time, all these data points, don't they count in terms of if we can map consciousness? it does kind of behoove us to go back to that kind of way of measuring reality. There'll be outliers, of course, but could there be something about mapping, which we're doing with all this research, all these incredible narratives. So more to come. Stay tuned.
Okay. Where do I look? Where do I look? Where should I be looking when this?
And I will tell Ann, and Ann will tell you. I promise.
Thank you.
I can't wait to share when I have something to share. I promise I have nothing now except anticipation.
Ann has all the goods. Ann carries all the goods.
Ooh, that's a big burden. Benoit had a question that follows up, I think, on this. Benoit?
Yes, thank you, Tony, for being here. I had a question somewhat related to the topic of the religious professional study, but not getting into it. One of the things that I'm always fascinated about is how we can continue to engage or just engage in general religious professionals about this work, and just the importance of the spiritual importance that these experiences have for the people, participants, patients, clients that are having them. I'm wondering why there isn't more effort, maybe there is, I just don't see it, but why there isn't more effort to engage people within the mystical traditions that are found in pretty much all religions, and how we can, like, what are the barriers to that interaction, and what are the potential contributions that those traditions might have for this work? Because I feel like a lot of those traditions, they've existed for thousands of years, and they have experience working with these states of consciousness, and experience grounding them, and experience working with them when they go awry, which they can do at the same time. So I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
One incredible question. So thank you. That's the whole enchilada right there. So I'm not going to discuss the study. Just put that aside because I can't, So, but the larger question, yes, as you beautifully put, yes, we have thousands of years of people, of humans working with mystical experience and teaching it and cultivating them and writing about them. We have, mountains of lovely of scripture and words and language and of everyday people, not just saints and mystics, everyday people having experiences. How can we learn from that? How can they help us, right? I mean, if we're doing mystical experience research, why not draw upon the religions? And in many ways we do. I mean, not about the study, but we do glean so much from the writings of the mystics, of Meister Eckhart, of so many people. So I think there's a real marriage there, obviously, and then it begs the question: how can these medicines be used in a way to help cultivate religious experience, which some could argue has been lost in the religion? So we just see it as my God's better than your God. These different silos. Well, all those silos are built upon the same, something about the same experience. And all the silos are beautiful. I mean, all of the 6 major religions are all incredibly beautiful in their framework, and their symbols, and their language. I'm not a religious scholar, so I'm not going to pretend to be one, but we could argue that the point of them was to connect to the sacred. At some point, you go beyond religion itself, but those symbols, those frameworks are here to connect to that, and to help us as humans to connect to the infinite and the eternal. And that's their purpose. But has that been washed away over time? And that's such a big question, and way beyond, what I could answer, but I think you're right. And these medicines have an incredible possibility for understanding consciousness and hopefully religion and these great mystic traditions. Everyone, I mean, from Zen to Christian to the Jewish mysticism, every religion has their mystic core, easily readable and obtainable by all of us. You're muted, Ann.
Sorry, just saying we're getting close to the end of the hour. I have some wonderful questions if you're willing and able to stay on a little longer.
Nowhere to go, nowhere to go, nowhere to be. This is it.
except that we do get zoomed out. But if you're willing to go, I'm willing to keep going. Thank you. And thanks to everyone who's been here. And if you need to go, we of course understand. I want to call on Joe Welker to ask an interesting question that's sort of, again, continuing this thread of conversation, please.
Sure. And thank you, Tony. Long been a fan of your work and appreciative of it. I'm a student at Harvard Divinity School, also a mystic in my own inclination. So my question, I've had this thought for a while of, have you encountered, or how do we account for religious people who might resist the idea that all religions are the same at their core? Classically, I've always thought of this as the evangelical Christian who wants to be exclusive with their Christ claims. But I also feel like I know some Buddhists who may resist the idea that Buddhism is the same as Christianity. And so, in other words, how do we make room for pluralism in addition to perennialism? And selfishly, could this be a place for psychedelically trained chaplains of different faiths? Thank you.
Wow, great question. And then perennialism has taken some appropriate criticism, right? I mean, I think that and again, I'm not a religious scholar, so I'm going to fall short of trying to say with firmness that this is the answer. But the critique of perennialism is that you water it down to some one kind of foundational experience, and you wash away the beauty of these various lineages, which I don't think is what the perennialists mean. I hope they don't mean that. Maybe some do, but that's not what Huxley meant. And so, and regarding is there one unitive experience, that's been argued for centuries. So I wouldn't even dare to go into that. But there do seem to be features specific to the mystic core of each religion that you could find that reflects whatever we call, and I don't like the word psychedelic experience because there isn't one experience, but that we associate with experiences generated by these medicines. So I think it's a great dialogue. I think you're the person, and you're the kind of person who's gonna, I think, spearhead this. What could the divinity schools and the theologians going forward teach us about where are they different beautifully, and where do we connect in terms of values? Not only the mystical experience, the second part of religion, I think, is then the fruits of your life. What do you do with that experience? Kindness, compassion, don't kill people, right? So, that I think everyone would agree. So, with all respect, I'm gonna almost put that back on you to help us in your divinity program, which is a great program, to help, where are they different, respectively so. I mean, a Zen mystic will differ from even a Tibetan mystic on what, Tibetan mystic may have a hard time with the word Tibetan mystic, actually. But, and so will many Zen mystics will say, no, it's not a religion. So I think there's enough room for interesting conversation. I will read a quick quote, speaking of religion. So the great Aldous Huxley, who we all know, wrote a letter to Thomas Merton, the great Christian mystic, about his psychedelic experiences. And part of his write-up was this: psychedelics helped me to understand many of the obscure utterances to be found in the writing of the mystics, both Christian and Asian. An unspeakable sense of gratitude for the privilege of being born in this universe. A transcendence of the ordinary subject-object relationship. This part I love. A transcendence of the fear of death. A sense of, and this next sentence here I want to highlight, and Bill Richards says this lovely in his book as well. There's something about these experiences that no matter how tough life is, and it's tough, it's hard, suffering, that somehow there's this kind of communication, and it's going to be okay. That it's okay the way it is, even with the darkness, even with the hurt, even with the, and people in our studies are weeping at the sorrow we do to each other. I mean, how we treat each other, the planet, but also an acceptance of this kind of, this is the way it is right now. And Huxley says this beautifully when he says, a sense of solidarity with the world and its spiritual principle, and the conviction that in spite of the pain, the evil, and all the rest, the evil, he says, everything is somehow all right. Finally, an understanding, not intellectual, but understanding and the affirmation that God is love. It's just a lovely letter. I don't think Merton ever did psychedelics. There's someone once approached me once and said that there's evidence he did once. I don't know if that's ever been documented. If someone knows that in the group, email me. Huxley wrote that letter to Merton, and Merton was one of the great Christian mystics of the last century. Thanks for your work and good luck to you. You're in a great field.
Thank you. Yeah, we're trying.
Thank you. This I'm going to read. Thank you, Lindsay Hively, for this question. What are your thoughts, Tony, on microdosing psilocybin as an adjunct to palliative care?
I guess I'm agnostic. I mean, what I've been focused on, what we know works through the research. So let's stay with what works through science. Is that the moderate to high dose psychedelic sessions triggers this incredible opening of consciousness for a few fleeting hours, and allows access to this incredible experience that, in the right circumstances, can recalibrate so much nature of life, death, and reality. The microdose is obviously different, so it wouldn't do that. Now, it might do something different, but there's no real evidence on microdosing research yet either. We're still waiting for some good, hopefully good data points to come out of that. But for me, and I could be wrong, I'm wrong a lot, it seems the moderate to high dose is what really matters in these studies, because that's the profound alteration in consciousness. That's the, what Richard Buck called the cosmic consciousness. That's the mystic or holy state. And that seems to recalibrate the whole ball game for some people.
You still okay for another couple of questions?
I'm good. I'm loving this.
Oh, thank you. We love having you. So this is from Mark Bates, and again, I'll read it because are there ways that we could better talk about and operationalize the role of love in psychedelic research?
Wow. Well, Mary, she'll be too embarrassed because she's so humble. Mary should come on and give a few words about that. Mark, by the way, thank you for the work you're doing. It's funny you said that. So when we present this literature a lot, I have to talk about what people tell us who are following the data, and they keep saying the word love, the experience of love. And then people would approach me over time and say, are there any measures that and we don't have really measures. I mean, it's part of some measures. In some of the big measures, there's a question or two about love, but how to operationalize it, I love it. It certainly is the feature that's changing people. Operationalize it, I'm open. Mark, Mary, want to say anything? Maybe Mary's gone.
No, I'm right here.
Oh.
I wouldn't leave this topic. Well, it's so interesting because, it's such a big question, but I will tell you my first thought is, when I started talking about it, that we know that love is such a, one of these words, what does it mean? It's used all the time, it's cliche. And of course, if you go deeper, that it's everything. But when I was writing about these studies and, what I believed was happening, what I found was, yes, it is love, but what is love? To put it on a more, a level that I could understand it more, which is love is connection. I've talked about it, Tony's talked about it, we all have connection to self, to others, to everything. And it is our true nature. So in one sense for me, and this is when we did our spiritual practice study, we had a lot of atheists, and not a lot, but we had atheists and agnostics among other, religions, beliefs, systems. And, after a while of doing the assessments, and people were saying, well, I don't really know how to answer that because I don't believe in God. And, you call this a spiritual practices study. And that's when I started writing. And that's when I realized our studies are beyond spirituality. They're beyond religion, because there is this core that is, we talk about, that we know. And it's really about, love, but it's our true nature. So it's about how to get to our true nature, our authentic self. And that's the word I used, because that to me speaks to what this work is about. Who are you? Why are you here? And
And the people have experiences that are unique to them, but then they always come, not always, but often then come back to this, you know, sounds spiritual, it sounds religious, but the core of it is, it comes back to our basic foundation, which, you know, I just actually heard this morning called enlightenment, is just this awareness of our presence, of our being. So enlightenment isn't about reaching this or this. It's about, enlightenment is about realizing who we are, our true nature, love. And so I don't know if that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's, and to echo that, I mean, Mary, you know, perfectly said, as always with you. Love is just a word, as Bill Richards always says, lovely, words are just things that fly through the, sounds that fly through the air. We call it that. And for thousands of years, that's a word that was used, but people try to describe it as just the fabric of who we are. It's connection, to use Mary's language. It's just, that's what this is. There's a great quote that I didn't have in today's slide deck, but of a first century, you know, Vedic type Buddhist Hindu combined, where he says that's the molecules of like reality. That's just the substance itself. You know, Paul Tillich talks about the religion beyond religion. We use words to connect to something, but at some point we go beyond the words. You know, what's the line? See the Buddha on the road, kill him. The point being, you don't attach to the words either. I agree with Mary. People just get caught up in trying to describe this, but use the word love a lot. And maybe there's a lesson that maybe we shouldn't try to nail down and operationalize everything. It's such a great part of the work. And yeah, so.
So I would thank both of you. I think forums like this, just talking about it, legitimizing it. I mean, the change I've seen in this work over the last 10 years, people wouldn't talk like this. And the two of you have been major leaders in allowing us all to talk like this. And people want to talk like this about love. So is that operationalizing? I don't know, but it's getting the word out, making people feel more comfortable. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And it goes beyond the platitudes. People hear the word love and they kind of roll their eyes. Oh, a Hallmark card. What's the purple dinosaur? I love you, you love me, we're happy. You know, whatever. You know, it's beyond the platitude. It's something that people speak about, this deep sense of our authentic self, as Mary is saying. And so, you know, anyway.
Thank you. So we have one more question. And I think we could talk all day. It would be wonderful. But so this is from Judith Flynn. And again, I'm going to read it just because it's quicker and more efficient. Tony, if you weren't limited by Schedule 1, how would you ideally use various medicines, psilocybin, MDMA, LSD, ayahuasca, ketamine, etc., in the support of end-of-life well-being?
Why is Mary laughing over there? Mary, why are you laughing? I see you laughing. If I wasn't limited by, well, let me put it into the framework of research. So when these medicines are all rescheduled and available for clinical trials and for the use in the culture, yeah, I think the classic hallucinogens, LSD, mescaline, psilocybin, would all seemingly produce the same results we're getting with the psilocybin trials, because that's what Pankey and Groff and Richards got back in the 1960s. They used LSD and DPT. So that I think wouldn't matter. The reason why we use psilocybin is it's a much more manageable experience clinically. It's a shorter half-life and a shorter time frame. You know, 6 hours more or less is the experience, with a 3 hour or so peak. With LSD, you have a much longer timeline. It would require an overnight stay, most likely. So there's that. There was the cultural taboo of LSD when we began the research. It just, to say we're doing LSD would have been a whole thing. And, you know, psilocybin grows on the planet, used for thousands of years by indigenous culture. So there's a landscape and a language there around these medicines. But I think that all three of those classic psychedelics will generate the mystical experience in the right setting. Medicines outside of that, I don't work with in clinical trials. I couldn't really say. ketamine is obviously different, but, I'd love to hear a ketamine person who's here maybe speak about that if they could. And ayahuasca obviously has profound experiences. We would love to see, hopefully sooner than later, when it's rescheduled, our centers, our places people go that are regulated, that are safe, with trained teams, interpersonally supportive teams with the right set and setting, and preparation, integration. You stay there for a week or two, then come back to your home to really immerse this in the way we know it works. And to be careful. We're at a very tenuous phase now. Everything's kind of opening up. And I know many of us do the research, just hope we can stay on this kind of sober, clear, responsible track, and keep it embedded within this framework that we know works, because we have the proof. And we know throughout history it worked in terms of being in a certain kind of sacred container. And let's hope we can all do that, because the next 5 years are going to be interesting, and hopefully they're good.
Great. Well, many, many thanks, Tony. We have this room open till 4 if people want to hang out. I just want to remind people, on Sunday, December 6th, we have Jay Sebelius coming to talk about gender equity. And on Sunday, January 10th, we have Bob Jesse talking about his role in this world, which has been huge for many years. And he's going to share some thoughts. So, and thank you, as always, to my whole BPRG team. Dick Simon, Ron Miss, Georgia Ellis, my husband Chip and Page, and then Sherry Race, amazing Sherry, who makes this all happen. So thank you all. And I love you.